because I have 2 children and I care about the future, and I don't think that building an LNG terminal that would import fracked gas is going to create a good future for my children or for other people's children for that matter. We are the Shannon LNG Coalition, supported by Shliella, who have kindly paid for this room today. We're supported by Love Leitrim, by Safety Before LNG, Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. Not Here, Not Anywhere, and others too. So we are a group, a lot of people. We are representing quite a lot of people here, not just ourselves. The reason we do this, again, it isn't for ourselves. It's because we all care about the future, and we all see that there's something really unjust happening in Ireland right now, and we want to do something about it. We believe that Shannon LNG it's not climate justice, it's not environmental justice, and it isn't energy justice. And we're going to talk about, everybody has something important to say about each reason that Shannon LNG should not be built here today. So you'll hear about who this development really is for. It's not for energy security for households. It's not for nursing homes. It's not for hospitals. It's like some government members would lead you to believe. This LNG terminal is only necessary for big tech. The George Orwell 1984 nightmare coming true. This frack gas will come from America to fill American-owned gas-guzzling data centres who host dark data used in military operations, privacy violations, and spread disinformation and misinformation to the end. So when we speak the truth, it's hard to know. The online noise is so loud, it's hard to hear us, but we will make ourselves heard. We will speak about the role of US politics, the toxic relationship that we have with the American abuser. We will speak about the decisions and the influence that America has on Ireland's energy policy. And you'll hear about what building an LNG terminal means for the Shannon Estuary, for Kerry, for the fracking ban that some activists here were involved in bringing about in 2017. And then you can ask questions and you can comment. So I will introduce each of our speakers. We'll only speak for 5 minutes each. We'll have Thomas from Extinction Rebellion, Owen Harris from Future Generations Kerry. We'll have Angela from Not Here, Not Anywhere. Diane Little will probably run in the door in a minute, and she'll scoot up there. She's from Land for Mana. We'll have Rosie from Friends of the Earth, Brian from Uplift, and Councillor Eddie Mitchell, who's our daddy from Love Leitrim. He's the daddy of the campaign. Okay, so we will start first with Thomas. So Thomas is an amazing campaigner. He's there at every opportunity to campaign for climate justice and for social justice. He works tirelessly. He's a great illustrator. He's very involved in this Shannon LNG Coalition. And please give a hand for Thomas Morelli.
Hello. My name is Thomas Morelli. I'm a member of Extinction Rebellion Ireland, and Extinction Rebellion Ireland, ever since it was first founded, has been strongly opposed to the Shannon LNG terminal. The climate crisis, as hopefully all of you know at this stage, is a very serious problem. It is a threat to billions of people, and what's really worrying is that there is no sign that this problem is being solved. The greenhouse gas emissions which are causing the climate crisis, the rate of those greenhouse gas emissions continues to rise and rise. The rate of those greenhouse gas emissions is not going down, which it urgently needs to. It's gotten to the stage now that I myself, I cannot go even a day without worrying about my future or worrying about the futures of the people I care about, or without worrying about the futures of the human race. And that's why it sickens me when I hear people saying, oh, Shannon LNG will supply us with LNG, or liquefied natural gas, that will be a transition fuel, or a fuel that we can use while we are transitioning to a society that does not emit any greenhouse gases. No, this cunning claim makes me sick. This claim is based on the fact that when LNG is burned, it releases less greenhouse gases than what is released when coal is burned. But that is very, very irrelevant, because the overall usage of LNG emits far more greenhouse gas than the overall usage of coal, because the people who claim LNG is cleaner, they are ignoring that when we cool LNG, when we transport LNG, when we store LNG, that all has greenhouse gas emissions. And as a result, a study was made on how much more than coal LNG emits overall, and it's about 33% more, and that figure doesn't take into account the additional emissions that would come from using LNG if that LNG is fracked. And make no mistake, if Shannon LNG is built, it will no doubt be importing fracked gas. New Fortress Energy, the company that wants Shannon LNG built, is a company that gets gas from fracking. So, fracking is a very dangerous way of extracting gas from the earth. And when this gas is extracted from the earth, not all of it is even captured for usage. It just floats up into the air, and that there is greenhouse gas emissions contributing to the climate crisis. So, building Shannon LNG would just lock us into using fracked gas for decades, and this is a worse fossil fuel than the fossil fuels that we are currently using. So it's clearly a step in the wrong direction. This is not a transition fuel. And as if the health problems caused by the climate crisis aren't enough of a reason to oppose Shannon LNG, it will also cause other health problems, because the Shannon LNG terminal, if built, would have a gas power plant built right next to it. And when you live next to a gas power plant, studies have shown that you are more likely to get all sorts of health problems, such as childhood cancer, or diabetes, or unfavorable pregnancy outcomes, or cardiovascular issues. And what's also a real problem, going back to the fact that this would definitely be fracked gas contains radioactive materials that can cause lung cancer. So people who will be living near this Shannon LNG terminal could be in serious danger of developing any of these health problems. So I'd like to finish by saying that building this Shannon LNG terminal, it's just not for the best, for the reasons that I've talked about, and for the reasons that the other people here today will be talking about soon. We just really cannot afford to let this go ahead. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Owen Harris from Future Generations Kerry. Owen is from close to where the now permitted Shannon LNG terminal is to be built. Many politicians and news outlets in Kerry would have people believe that there is ample local support for the terminal. and it would be good for the county. However, Owen will inform you of the real story in terms of local implications of a frack gas import terminal in County Kerry.
Actually, do I stand up? I
Yeah,
suppose,
yeah.
Have you ever got this kind of look?
Louder.
Loud project.
That's the kind of look that I got from some people who were pro LNG and some people who didn't know me too well. When I started this in 2000, and when I joined this, I should say, in 2018, 2019, and that's the kind of look of, well, what's in it for him? You know, what's he getting out of this? And I suppose it's not surprising, like, we live in an age of cynicism, and you know, why wouldn't that be their first reaction? When we see kind of, I suppose, especially now after the Green government are gone, why wouldn't they think that? Like from the start, it was always just a moral imperative, as Sinead said, you know. There's no other reason really, like, and when we think of like the sacrifices that Johnny McKelligot made, like we pales in comparison, you know. But like this cost benefit analysis stuff, you know, it prevails. Like I didn't even know back then that that we actually live in a shale gas basin, and yeah, there's millions under our feet of untapped resources, and I didn't even know back then that LNG terminals can be easily converted from import terminals to export terminals at the cost of building a new one. And this is exactly what is this is exactly what has been done in parts of, I think, Louisiana, and it's what they're talking about doing now in Brazil and in Victoria, in Australia, where they have imported fracked gas. Fracking is back on the cards, and why wouldn't it be? Like, we lose the moral argument when we take in fracked gas, you know, and from emissions perspective, it's much cleaner to frack it here. So no, we can't have fracking in North Kerry. We can't, and we can't have fracked gas imports into North Kerry. Like we've arrived here now because of really, it's not because of some independent TDs who have gone into the government. This all kind of started in 2013 or 2023 and before, and it was a betrayal. We know now that Eamon Ryan had multiple meetings with the US ambassador at the time. That's only been how are we going to supply energy, more energy for data centres, and specifically about gas. So we know this now. It's only in the last few weeks, and we arrived here because, you know, we didn't call him to account early enough. We were too late. Not enough people maybe believed it. In the environmental movement, believed that the Greens could do this. Not enough people maybe stuck their neck out far enough. But we are fighting. We are sorting this out inside the environmental movement, and we'll come out stronger because of it, and more powerful. Because you need the grassroots power, and when you take that away, you've got nothing. So what I would say to people, on the political spectrum, because the worst thing about what Eamon Ryan did is, like, you had the likes of Sinn Féin and Labour implicitly kind of going along with this, and it's a false war narrative. Like, you know, they have Operation Cockle now, a war game scenario. It's the only scenario they could pick to get this in. Two of our interconnectors being blown up at the same time, and now they're doing war game simulations. I'd ask you not to humour this false narrative for a second, especially if you think this government will fall, you're looking for power, and you think the Shannon Estuary is an expendable thing that you can trade away. And I'm just asking you, think about it, think of your children's futures, and stick your neck out, please. And we will be doing it, and we will support you. And all the people in North Kerry that I suppose they're all starting to wake up now. They thought they wouldn't have to kind of have that awkward silence in the butchers, or get the scowl from the public, because everybody's against this. Nobody wants this in North Kerry. People are just scared to speak out because, you know, they feel like they'll be castigated. But we're working on this, and we're going to be on the ground there. We're going to be giving those support to those people to stick their neck out and to fight this. But we need everybody. We need everybody who knows the implications of this. We need them to just be with us and go for it, and don't do any cost-benefit analysis. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Owen. Now we'll have Angela, who's from the Not Here, Not Anywhere campaign. Not Here, Not Anywhere have been campaigning against Shannon LNG for many years and have attempted to introduce a bill to the Dáil that would legislate for a ban on LNG terminals. So Angela will tell you more about this now.
Yeah, so thank you. So I'm Angela Deegan with Not Here, Not Anywhere. We're a nationwide grassroots, all volunteer group campaigning to end fossil fuel development in Ireland and the development of any fossil fuel infrastructure. And we advocate for publicly owned renewable energy and for society-wide reduction in demand. And we're a non-partisan group, not affiliated with any political party. It probably goes without saying, since we're against fossil fuel infrastructure, that we are against any LNG terminals in any form whatsoever. And we've been campaigning on that for years along with other groups. And that included the LNG bill to ban LNG terminals in the last Dáil. But that was a private member's bill, and now with the new government, of course, it would have to be introduced, and that's something that we would be asking politicians to do, is to introduce a new LNG ban bill in the Dáil. Very important. And we also have an uplift petition, which has thousands of signatures, and if you haven't signed it, please do. Keep Ireland LNG free. And then we also campaign for reduction in energy demand, like I mentioned. So on that side of things, of course, we campaign in regard to data centres, because I think the latest stat is that they're now using 27% of our energy. So we're campaigning for a moratorium on data centres as well. So the people who've spoken before me have made some great points already. I'm just going to focus on a couple of points. I mean, obviously, we need... it's reckless for the government to be proposing an LNG terminal when we're in a climate crisis. LNG, as Thomas mentioned, is about 33% worse than coal in terms of its greenhouse gas emissions. So it's reckless from that respect. But the government is also jumping the gun and being reckless in relation to the fact that there's a report that was commissioned by the Department of Energy for Gas Networks Ireland was to do this report, and this report has been completed, and this was at the end of the energy security review report was to look into the option of an LNG terminal as an option to address what is perceived as energy security concerns. Now, that report has not been published, and it's very concerning. Why has that not been made publicly available? Our group, Not Here, Not Anywhere, we have filed to try and get that report released, and so we're anxiously awaiting that to be released. Apparently, parts of it are going to be redacted, but that needs to be publicly available. And then the other thing is, towards the end of the last government, it was recognised by the then Minister of the Environment that there had been significant developments. For instance, the electrical interconnector with the UK, which had been thought to only to be 97% exports of electricity from Ireland. It's now seen to be actually substantially bringing imports of electricity. So that really affects our energy security. That's good for our energy security, right? So, and also there are two interconnectors with the UK and France, which had been thought they wouldn't be online until 2030, but now it's looking like they're going to be online earlier. So we need that analysis completed. The consultant is SEPA, a group called SEPA, and we need that analysis completed, and we need a public consultation on that analysis. So the government is totally jumping the gun here, making this decision to approve LNG before that information is available and before there's been a consultation on that report, as there should be under the Aarhus Convention. So that's the reports. And then I just briefly will talk about New Fortress Energy. They're a very shady company. So that's the company that wants to build this LNG terminal. They've been trying for 20 years. They've been at this. And, make no mistake about it. They want to get in there in any shape, form they can. And they're going to want to sell as much of that gas as they possibly can. Even if it's under the guise of energy security, they're going to want to maximize their sales. I mean, that's the business they're in. So they're on the verge of bankruptcy. They reported to their own investors that if they don't refinance 875 million in debt by next July, they're finished. And then they've been really shady in their dealings in Puerto Rico. It's the only place where they have a public-private partnership, and the numbers that they presented to their investors would have Puerto Rico 100% powered by natural gas, in complete contradiction of Puerto Rico's public policy of 100% renewable energy by 2050. So if that's they're completely disregarding Puerto Rico's goals for greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So you can expect they will do the same here in Ireland. So we cannot let this terrible shady company have any involvement in Ireland, or get their foot in the door here in Ireland. So what can politicians do? Well, they can, any politicians in the room, push for the release of that, for that Gas Networks Ireland report to be made public, and push for the completion of the SEPA report, that analysis, and to have a public consultation on that. And then we also need politicians to get another LNG bill, LNG terminal, the ban on an LNG terminal. We need a bill for that to be introduced in the Oireachtas. And at the local authority level, we'd like to see councillors raising motions calling on the government LNG, to ban LNG. So politicians at every level can have a role in this. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, so next, thanks very much, Angela. Next we have Rosie Leonard, so you're very welcome here, who's representing Friends of the Earth, and they are doing fantastic work, particularly Rosie, on data centres, and I would recommend that if you haven't read the Hannah Daly report commissioned by Friends of the Earth, I highly recommend that you do read it. Rosie will present today on the links between data centres and Shannon LNG.
Thanks, Sinead. I might just stay sitting down because I have an issue with my back. That's okay. But yeah, as Sinead said, what I would like to focus on a little bit is who this energy is supposedly for, and other speakers have spoken very well about how the government, in particular Micheál Martin and Simon Harris, have kind of masked all this around the language of energy security. And we would ask, well, energy security for who? Because the other plan that Shannon LNG and New Fortress Energy, as Angela mentioned, have for their land banks in North Kerry are data centres. And this isn't us inventing it, they have stated this, it's in their onboard Planala applications. And we feel that this is where the mask completely slips. You can kind of read this backwards and see this as a way of them locking in customers for the LNG that they plan to import. Caroline Doherty of the Irish Independent reported that the data centre which Shannon LNG plans to build on its bank next to the gas plant which it's building, which has been approved, that about 50% of the gas from that gas plant will go to power the data centres. So it actually won't be for the local community, as they've said this. Now, what we in Friends of the Earth would like to see happen is we'd like to see a moratorium on data centres. As Angela's already mentioned, they're using about 21% of our electricity grid at the moment. This is a complete outlier in Europe. It's not a normal situation. So the average amount of grid capacity that data centres are taking up in other European countries is around about 3%. We're at 21%. So what's this all about, and who are the agents behind this? New Fortress Energy recently announced that they plan to build hyperscale data centres across their land banks around the world. That includes Ireland. These hyperscale data centres, they're essentially for companies like Amazon, Meta, Facebook, well, Facebook is Meta, Microsoft, to run generative AI, to store advertising data on people. We would argue that they are not for public good. They are not in the service of public health. And the other kind of, I suppose, argument that they are using around this is that they're vital for jobs. But actually, when we challenged, through Paul Murphy, we challenged Peter Burke, the Minister for Trade, on the angle around jobs and how many jobs do data centres actually employ? And he couldn't give us an answer. So I'd really appeal to anyone who's in North Kerry who's hearing these promises of jobs. I believe a Fine Gael councillor recently said there's something like 50,000 jobs that'll happen if they open up this land bank to LNG and data centres and the energy park that they want to create, where essentially these gas plants and LNG will be servicing these data centres. This 50,000 jobs is a total myth. There are many, like a few skeleton jobs in these places, and people in North Kerry deserve much better. There is now a situation emerging in Ireland where the development of data centres is coming straight up against the development of other infrastructure, such as housing, such as healthcare. If people were serious in North Kerry about building jobs out for the community, they would be looking at hospital waiting lists. I read this morning that there's about 11,500 people on a waiting list in hospital in North Kerry. So we're kind of being sold a pup here, and data centres are being used as kind of the hammer by which to get all of these gas plants and Shannon LNG rammed through in complete violation of all of our climate obligations. So I will leave it there. Thank you very much.
We have Brian Cuthbert from Uplift is up next. And so we really appreciate the support of Uplift and, you know, such an excellent advocacy organisation based in Ireland. Adding NGOs with grassroots like FOE and Uplift, that's always a really positive collaboration. This collaboration will continue as we go forward and continue to fight against frack gas.
Thanks very much for having us, and thanks for everybody for turning up today. On behalf of Uplift, we're a community of over 350,000 members all around the island of Ireland. And quite frankly, we cannot afford LNG in Ireland. About 2 weeks ago, the Fiscal Advisory Council released a report that said that if we are to miss our climate targets, it could cost us up to €26 billion. This is much more than the government surplus. This is more than twice the Apple tax money. This is an enormous figure. We do not have that money. LNG will cost us money. Missing our climate targets will cost us money. And this is a cost that will be borne by the Irish public. We will lose money in investment in things like public health, housing and critical infrastructure. Also that the profits of small fossil fuel bosses can be made enlarged at our expense. LNG is one of the most expensive fossil fuels. LNG prices are extremely volatile. We've seen it many times where LNG ships will turn around mid-course and change direction to go to a higher bidder. Basically, you will see fossil fuel bosses holding the Irish public to ransom on this. People who are trying to heat their homes will be squeezed for every single penny that they have, again, to enrich a small number of fossil fuel bosses abroad. In addition, the cost of climate breakdown is another huge factor that we have to wake up to. We saw a couple of months ago that Storm Owen, the damage that was caused there. As climate change worsens and as we fail to deal with climate change, as the oceans warm up, more and more storms and more stronger hurricanes will make their way across the Atlantic to Ireland, and it will be ordinary people who are left to pick up the pieces, and will have to pay those costs at the end of the day. Finally, just to touch on the point around data centres, we know from an earnings call in 2019 that Wes Eden said to his investors that they will be creating an LNG terminal to supply a US LNG terminal supplying US gas to US data centres in Ireland. They have this thing all sewn up. It's a shell game for them, and we're just being used as a puppet in the process. LNG companies, data centre companies, fossil gas generators and Shannon LNG will be offered what are known as capacity subsidies. This is where the Irish government is paying them just to have capacity available, which means not only are we going to pay them through the nose for the high prices of gas that we use, we're also going to be paying them for the energy that they have that we don't use. So they're making money either way. Whether they sell the gas or not, we're going to be paying them. This is a cash grab, plain and simple. We cannot afford LNG. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Diane. Diane Little has joined us today from Fermanagh. Diane was very involved in the anti-fracking campaign in Fermanagh and other Ulster counties, and has contributed to the Shannon LNG campaign as well as to the ban on fracking. US in Irish energy policy.
I need to come down and say a few words on this situation. I'm also, I think at the moment, probably one of the most important things that I can say to you today is that I'm doing a Masters in Global Inequality in Queen's University in Belfast, and this last module I've been studying extremism across the world and the rise of the far right. In particular, in that regard, we're looking at what's happening in the US at the moment, and what we're seeing in the US is a lot of violations of free speech, even curtailing education, women's reproductive rights being curtailed, LGBT rights, demonising minorities and torture. And where does that actually leave us? We're with an administration at the moment that is denying climate change. Trump is calling climate change a hoax. He's rolling back regulations. He's boosting, the fossil fuel industry by rolling back those regulations. He's pulled the US out of the climate agreement, and he's repealed, clean water rules. So wouldn't that be an absolute disaster if somebody from that administration was making policy for Ireland? And yet, the Business Post have reported that US Embassy staff met with the Department of Environment in 2023 and 2024, and they lobbied for the interests of US companies for data centres, and they're seeking policy to be made in the US. And it seems now we're seeing the decisions of this government that this is what is happening. So that is a very serious situation. When you see what's happening in the US, it's very clear now that the interest of a small number of billionaires are in control in making US policy. And from where I'm standing and what I'm watching, that's now what's happening in Ireland. And this breaches non-intervention Article 2 of the UN Charter. It breaches Ireland's constitutional autonomy, the right to making our own or your own policy and law without external influence, EU laws that prohibit that external influence, World Trade Organization rules, Energy Charter Treaty. It undermines the ethics of public office. It prohibits public officials from that are prohibited from accepting external pressures that could undermine independent policy made by the Irish government on behalf of the public interest in Ireland. It undermines Aarhus Convention, the rights under Aarhus Convention that gives us, we should be free of the US influence in terms of our public consultation. We can't have that undermined. It undermines democratic principle. Policy must reflect the will of the people, not the interests of a foreign power, and certainly not the interests of a foreign power that has abandoned climate science and is prioritising the greed of billionaires. There's a clear public mandate for renewable energy, but the Irish government is now ignoring that consensus, is ignoring climate science and human rights. What is also being ignored, and I have spent 10 years in Fermanagh coordinating with groups in the south and groups in the north to protect our community from fracking. And in the course of that, we did a big piece of work with the Irish Centre for Human Rights. And what they found when they looked at what was happening to the people where fracking was happening was their rights to life, their rights to health, to water, to food, to housing, to information, to participation, the right to a clean, safe, healthy, sustainable environment. They were all compromised. You're also ignoring all the human rights violations that will arise as a result of climate change. When populations are displaced, when you have increased migration, their rights to life, to health, to housing, to food, to water, and you have a disproportionate impact on women and children. And again, we see all of this when women are displaced by climate. This is a very serious situation, because also, not only can we not be exploiting the communities where the fracking is happening and their human rights, while our communities are being protected in fracking bans, for the interests of the US administration, such as it is at the moment. But we need to consider the people where this is coming from, because we have such a strong relationship with them because of the years that they helped us. These people who we are asking for protection for now, where the frack gas is coming from, they helped our community, they helped protect our community. Their doctors spoke to us. We have close relationships with that community now, and we're absolutely disgusted now that they will be exploited for this. I want to speak lastly about our community in Northern Ireland. There's two particular problems for us in maybe three. Three particular problems for us in Northern Ireland. The risk of bringing frack gas into your pipelines, again, puts us at risk. We have only just got a ban on petroleum licensing in Northern Ireland. We've only just got that. We haven't actually got that into legislation in Northern Ireland. We're soon to get it into legislation, but it hasn't actually arrived yet. So we're not fully protected in Northern Ireland yet, as you have your fracking in Canada. And we are the peak target. I live actually in the centre, the epicentre of the area that has been under licence for over 10 years. It's my home, it's my community. And we know what it will do if it comes. And bringing frack gas into your energy, it's integrated. One of the few things that is integrated. Whereas in Northern Ireland we don't have integration. We've had such a long journey. But when you bring frack gas into the pipelines, we become a target again. And that puts a target on us as a community. When I've just outlined the human rights violations, you're talking about a community that has seen 35 years of human rights violations. We have one of the world's highest rates of PTSD in our community. it's we simply cannot tolerate this industry and the trauma of this industry coming into our community, and bringing frack gas into our pipelines is doing that. The other second issue that we have in Northern Ireland is that there's a common wholesale electricity market, and we've seen the experience of LNG coming into the UK, and what's happening is that there's a sort of a marginal pricing system where your electricity prices are linked to your price of gas. So that's setting the market price. So what it means is what happened whenever the LNG came into the UK, that's what's influencing your price. So we are now now putting ourselves at risk of the global markets on the price of electricity. That is putting us at risk of increase in rise of electricity. But there's no connection with our community in Northern Ireland, because this is a common shared network. So when you have higher increases in costs of something that is a basic need, what's not being considered is that we in Northern Ireland have much higher rates of income poverty. We have surging material deprivation rates. We have austerity, and now we have a second version of austerity in terms of welfare cuts. This is hurting our most vulnerable and putting our most vulnerable at risk. We have a child poverty rate of 30% in Northern Ireland. So we need basic needs, in terms of food, heat, the stress, and that deepening inequality are all very serious issues and serious risk for the community in Northern Ireland that's absolutely not being considered by the government in the south. When Ireland's policy on energy is being made, we need it to be made in the public interest, and we need consideration of our community in Northern Ireland. There's a mandate for renewable energy that's been ignored in the face of the lobby from the US. We cannot have policy dictated by the US administration, because effectively your policy and your policy making in the south is our policy. It's so the pipelines, everything's networked. So we cannot have a situation where, and I can tell you as a student of extremism who is studying the rise of the far right, and all of the deprivation and all of the inequality and all of the human rights violations that come with that is just astronomical in terms of free speech, all of your basic rights. This is about human rights. This is about what happens whenever you allow oligarchs to make your policy. And we have to consider that that's what's happening, and the really serious impacts of, even for us, when there's people seeking a united Ireland, what is the impact for us, and how does it look? And I'm telling you, it doesn't feel good for Northern Ireland to be seeing what's happening in Ireland. We have to consider the human rights, we have to consider the energy prices, we have to consider vulnerable people, but most of all, we must have democracy. And I think that you really need to be thinking about who's actually in control here. Who is making your energy policy? Because it seems like it is this US administration who don't even accept that there is such a thing as climate change. So I think you're in a lot of trouble. When I arrived here, there was several protests outside. All of these protests are linked. We have to recognise the shared interest here, and you have to join the campaigns, and we have to join campaigns together, and we have to absolutely stop this, because if we do not stop this, if we do not stop the US making policy in Ireland, then where does that end? I'm telling you, it doesn't end well.
Our last speaker today, before we open the floor for questions and comments, is Councillor Eddie Mitchell. He's the spokesperson for Love Leitrim, and he's a long-time campaigner against fossil fuel development in Shelter to Sea as well as in Leitrim, and very much involved in getting the legislative ban against fracking in Ireland. Go ahead, Eddie. He's also the daddy of our campaign.
That's a new one now for me. Well, I'll take that. I'm over 50 now, so I suppose it's time to grow up and accept that this is my role. So I think that we're only coming to terms really with what happened in the last few weeks. Like what happened in the last few weeks didn't start in the last few weeks. It did start, as Owen said, in 2023, when we had this pressure on the Irish government, and when the Irish government must have broken and accepted that they wanted to feed this future demand. You know, when the American ambassador made that argument that we needed to that the American companies here were very worried about future energy demand. So like when we have the conversation about energy security, it's not energy security the way it's been talked about. It's about the secure energy to meet future energy demand that's going to rise by, maybe we're hearing 40%, much of which will be based on data centre growth. So like what this means is that the Irish government have decided to walk away from climate mitigation. Literally walk away. That's the point in which we're at. So like, and that's amazing, because that's a turning point. So the question is, they've flown this kite that they want to do this, and then that's a moment where we decide then, because that's just a kite, and I'm looking at Frank here because he's here to listen to what will accept us walking away from climate mitigation. And if you look around the room, you can see that the Irish will not accept walking away from a future where we try to stay under 1.5, where we try to get to net zero, where we actually are really serious about the future of our children. Like, where it's not just a narrative that's just a false narrative.